The studio lights were brighter than usual. It was a special edition of the global talk show, World Voices, filmed in a massive theater in Manhattan. It wasn't just any show tonight. It was the first time President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso and former U.S. President Donald Trump would share the same stage, in front of a live audience. The premise was supposed to be light, even hopeful, a conversation between two world figures from dramatically different backgrounds. But something else was about to unfold. Trump arrived first, as expected, wearing a navy blue suit, red tie, and the familiar confident gait. He smiled and waved to the roaring audience, clearly in his element. Across from him, Traoré entered with little fanfare, a simple gray suit, no tie. He walked quietly to his seat, hands folded. His presence wasn't loud, but it was firm. The host, Marla Jameson, a well-known international journalist, welcomed both men with a smile. "Tonight," she began, "we witness not a debate, not a clash, but a conversation." The crowd applauded, but the tension was already electric. 10 minutes in, the conversation was playful. Trump cracked a few jokes. "I don't know much about Burkina Faso," he said with a laugh, "but I hear your president's a tough guy." The audience chuckled. Traoré nodded respectfully but said nothing. Trump leaned back confidently. "You know, I ran the biggest economy in the world. I built towers, I wrote books, I've met kings, I've made peace deals. What's it like being president of a country where people have never even heard of you?" Gasps fluttered through the audience. Traoré didn't blink. He waited for the laughter, however uneasy, to subside. Then he leaned forward softly. "Mr. Trump," he said, "the world may not know where my country lies on the map, but my people know where hope begins when everything else is forgotten." A hush fell over the studio. "You measure power in towers. I measure it in how many children can sleep without hunger tonight." Trump smirked, trying to maintain control. "Look, I admire passion, but let's be honest, speeches don't feed anyone." "No," Traoré replied calmly, "but neither do walls." The audience froze. This wasn't going to be a light segment anymore. Trump stiffened. He was used to applause, not silence, to victory, not reflection. But Traoré didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He simply sat with a stillness that made the silence heavier than any insult. Marla Jameson, sensing the shifts, tried to guide the conversation elsewhere. "President Traoré," she asked, "what does leadership mean to you?" Traoré looked to the audience. "My father was not a president," he began softly. "He was a farmer. He taught me to plant seeds in drought. He taught me to wait for rain, not applause. Leadership is not measured by how many people shout your name. It is measured by how many people whisper your name in gratitude after they have eaten." The room stayed quiet. Trump's eyes narrowed. "That's all noble," he said, voice quieter now. "But nobility doesn't build empires." "No," Traoré answered, "but it saves souls." Trump leaned back, clearly shaken, but trying not to show it. The audience didn't clap. They simply listened. Traoré's voice was steady. "I do not have towers with gold. I have clinics without beds. I do not sign billion-dollar deals. I sign death certificates for children who died because medicine didn't arrive in time. That is my empire. Trump looked away. The camera caught it. The former president, so used to being the most powerful person in the room, was slowly being disarmed. Not by argument, but by truth. Later in the show, as the segment neared its final act, Marla said, "We've received a letter. A young girl from Florida sent something after hearing about this meeting." She opened the envelope slowly. The letter was from Isabel, age 12, whose father had recently lost his job. It read, "Dear President Trump and President Traoré, I don't know much about politics, but I know when people are kind or mean. Mr. Trump, my dad said you were a fighter. Mr. Traoré, my mom said you speak like a poet. I just want a world where no one gets laughed at because they are different. Thank you for sitting together. I hope I can grow up to be someone strong, but not mean." The room was stunned. Trump was quiet. Traoré smiled faintly, nodded. Then, something unexpected happened. Trump cleared his throat. I've said things before," he began, "that were meant to win a crowd. But that little girl..." His voice cracked slightly. He swallowed. "I don't want her to grow up thinking power means making people feel small." It was the first time all night he seemed human. Traoré looked at him, not with judgment, but with something softer. Understanding. "Then, speak for her," Traoré said gently. "Not for history. Speak for her future." After the taping ended, the crowd stayed seated. No rush to exit, just a lingering silence that tasted like change. Trump walked off stage, quietly. His usual entourage hovered, unsure of what to say. In the dressing room, he sat alone, staring at the floor. A producer walked in with his phone. "Sir, you should see this." The clip was already online. Donald Trump's silence by Ibrahim Traoré's graceful truth. Millions of views within hours. Not because it was scandalous, but because it felt real. Trump scrolled through the comments. That silence after Traoré's words hit deeper than any debate. First time I've seen Trump actually listen. Traoré didn't break him. He invited him to reflect. He put the phone down. Then he stood up, walked out of the room, and headed for President Traoré's dressing room. The hallway between the green rooms was quiet. Just a hum of distant equipment, and the fading sound of the crowd still sitting in thoughtful stillness. Trump stopped outside a plain white door. Traoré." He paused, hand hovering near the handle, then knocked. Twice. A moment. Then, "Come in." Trump entered. Traoré stood near a small table, pouring tea into a single glass cup. No staff, no noise, just calm. Trump didn't speak at first. Traoré gestured to the other chair. Trump sat. Silence lingered between them. Finally, Trump broke it. "You didn't embarrass me," he said. "You exposed something I didn't know was missing." Traoré didn't gloat. He simply nodded once. "That was never my aim," he replied. Trump leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You talk like a pastor." "No," Traoré said, sipping his tea. "Pastors guide souls. I just try not to lose mine." Trump chuckled softly, unexpectedly. "I've been in rooms with kings, generals, billionaires, but you—" He looked away. "You talk like your heart still hurts for people." "Mine's forgotten how." That struck the air like lightning. Traoré slowly set his cup down. "Then remember." Trump looked at him. "How?" "By going where silence speaks louder than applause," Traoré said. "Come with me, not to your cities, to mine." 3 days later, against all expectations and without any press announcement, Donald Trump landed quietly in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. No red carpet, no motorcade. Just a modest convoy of 2 SUVs, one of which carried Traoré himself. When Trump stepped off the small charter jet, he wasn't in his usual crisp suit. He wore a plain white shirt, sleeves rolled, and simple loafers. For the first time in decades, no tie. Traoré greeted him with a handshake, then pulled him gently into an embrace. No cameras flashed, no reporters shouted questions. They drove through the city, the roads dusty, the buildings modest. Trump watched people wave, not at him but at Traoré, not with flags or frenzy, but quiet reverence. "Is this your capital?" Trump asked. Traoré nodded. "Yes, but we are not staying here." 2 hours later, they arrived in a village with no running water, no paved roads. Children ran barefoot toward the vehicles. One little girl, no older than 6, held a hand-drawn picture. A stick figure in a red cap, standing next to a tall man with a cane. Trump smiled. "Is that me?" Traoré translated her words. "She says you looked sad on the show. She drew you happy." Trump swallowed. And for a moment the old armor, the steel face built over decades, cracked. That evening, they sat under a baobab tree in the village square. There was no podium, no lights, just stars. Trump, his shirt sleeves still rolled, was sweating lightly from the heat. He watched villagers gather with candles and sit on the ground. Traoré handed him a folded blanket to sit on. They sat in silence again. Finally, Trump said, "I spent years building towers. I measured worth in floor counts, net worths, TV ratings. But this," he gestured to the people sitting in the dirt, smiling, laughing, alive. "This feels more real than all of it." Traoré nodded. "It is." "I was a president," Trump muttered. "And I don't know if I ever sat like this with my people." "You still can," Traoré said. "Being out of office doesn't mean being out of responsibility." Trump looked at him, really looked. "You believe that, don't you?" Traoré turned to him. "A leader's power doesn't die after the term ends. It begins when they understand they are not above, but within their people." Trump wiped his face with a handkerchief. His voice was quieter now. "Why did you agree to sit with me on that show?" Traoré paused. "Because we are different men, but our people, yours and mine, are hurting the same. If we can sit together, maybe they can too." The next morning, A young boy approached Trump as he prepared to leave the village. He was about 10. His shoes were falling apart, shirt 2 sizes too big. He held something carefully folded. Pour vous, he said shyly. For you. Trump opened the letter. It was in French. Traoré translated. Monsieur Trump, I don't know America, but I know sadness. My papa died last year. My mama says the world is full of men with noise, but not many with kindness. You looked quiet yesterday. I think that is when you were real. I hope when you go home, you keep that quiet. Trump didn't speak. He folded the letter with trembling fingers and placed it inside his shirt pocket, over his heart. Traoré stood beside him. Children, he said softly, can see what cameras miss. They looked around the village one last time. Then Trump said something no one expected. Would you help me build a school here? Not with headlines, but with silence. Traoré placed a hand on his shoulder. Let's build it with truth. 6 months later, a single-story building stood at the edge of that same village. No metal detectors, no logo, just sun-washed brick, blue-painted doors, and the words carved above the entrance in French. École de vérité silencieuse, the School of Silent Truth, built in partnership between Donald J. Trump and President Ibrahim Traoré, but not promoted, not televised, not tweeted. No speeches, no ribbon cutting. Instead, children flooded into the schoolyard with wide eyes and tightly gripped pencils. Inside, new wooden desks gleamed under sunlight pouring through open windows. In the back of the classroom was a mural, hand-painted by the village artists. 2 men sitting under a baobab tree, one older with silver hair and a red tie slung over his shoulder. The other younger, quiet-eyed, in a plain tunic. Between them, a child, holding both their hands. Trump visited the school privately, arriving in a modest jeep. He brought no entourage, only a notebook. He walked into the first classroom where 15 children sat waiting. One by one, they stood and introduced themselves. The last girl spoke softly. My name is Fanta. I want to be president one day, but not loud, like you were here. Trump's eyes watered, and this time he didn't hide it. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for reminding me who I might still be. 1 week later, back in the United States, Trump stood behind a simple podium. No flag backdrop, no blaring theme song, just a plain wooden stage in a community center in Harlem. People were surprised to see him there, but curious. Reporters waited with pens, but this time, Trump didn't perform. He began differently.
I used to think power was loud, that it came from saying more, faster, bigger. But I met a man, and he changed that.
He paused, let the silence breathe.
President Ibrahim Traoré didn't argue with me. He didn't debate me. He just told the truth. And somehow, that truth cracked something open in me.
A woman in the third row blinked through tears. Trump continued.
I visited his country. I saw children who walked barefoot just to learn. And one of them gave me a letter a letter that said, I looked quiet for the first time. I didn't know that was a compliment until then.
He looked down, collected himself.
This country raised me. This country built me. But maybe I need to help rebuild it. Not with towers, but with truth.
Gasps, silence, not applause, just stillness.
I don't need to run again. I need to walk slower, speak softer, listen deeper.
He stepped away from the podium. No catchphrase, no soundbite, just a quiet man walking off stage.
And the country, for once, listening without judgment.
That same night, Trump posted a single tweet. To President Ibrahim Traoré, you gave me silence when I deserved noise. You showed me that humility isn't surrender, it's strength. You are my brother. Thank you. Attached was a photo. The two men under the baal tree. The internet didn't laugh, it cried. Hashtags trended across platforms. When silence speaks, Traoré fecked. Trump turned page. Young men from both Harlem and Ouagadougou began sharing letters online. Apologies, reflections, promises. Professors cited the event as a case study in transformational masculinity. A late-night host who once parodied both men gave a 5-minute heartfelt monologue. We witnessed something no script could write. When the world mocked, two men sat down and listened. 1 year later, the school had expanded to 3 more villages. It became a pilot model, combining emotional education with literacy. The sign outside read, "Founded by 2 men who learned to listen." And inside the principal's office hung 2 framed letters. The first, from Trump's team, thanking the village for giving him something priceless, perspective. The second, from Traoré himself, it read,
Dear children, the world will try to teach you that being loud means being strong. But remember, even in a storm, the deepest roots grow in silence.
Trump sits quietly in his New York apartment, alone. The television is off. The phone is face down. He reads a small book of West African proverbs gifted by Traoré. On the first page, a sticky note in Traoré's handwriting. The lion does not need to roar. His silence is known by the forest. Trump smiles, then opens a blank notebook. He writes, "This chapter began on TV, but it ended under a tree." The camera zooms out through the window above the city skyline until the lights fade into stars, fade to black.